Welcome back to Spine-Chilling Stories, the place where we bring your worst fears to life through terrifying true stories and unsettling tales. In today's story, we're going to dive into a solo camping trip that turned into an absolute nightmare. So, turn off the lights, settle in, and let's begin. And if you enjoy our content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a story. I slammed the car door and yelled over my shoulder, "I'm not scared of anything." My brother stood on the porch, shaking his head, warning me one last time not to go camping alone. He rattled off stories about bears, mountain lions, and even local legends, skinwalkers, witches, and whatever else he thought might scare me into staying home. But I wasn't having it. "Be careful, man," he called out. "People have gone missing up there." I waved him off, putting on a brave face, but deep down, there was a gnawing feeling in my gut. I didn't want to back down, not after telling everyone I needed this solo camping trip to clear my head. I'd been struggling, truth be told. Life had hit me hard. Lost my job, broke up with my girlfriend, and I felt like I was drowning in my own thoughts. It got to the point where even getting out of bed seemed like a battle. I didn't know how to fix it, and the idea of just disappearing had crossed my mind more. Then once, a friend suggested getting away, really away. A solo camping trip. He said there's something about nature that helps you sort through things. I latched onto that idea, figuring maybe the isolation would bring me peace. I chose the most remote spot on the map, deep in the Rocky Mountain National Forest. It was supposed to be beautiful and, more importantly, far away from everything and everyone. The day of the trip was perfect, blue skies, crisp air. Driving through the mountains felt like a breath of fresh air. No traffic, no city noise, just me and the road winding through dense forests. I turned off my phone, locked it in the glove box, and promised myself 5 days of pure disconnection. I arrived at the park late in the day, too late to hike to the remote campsite I had planned. There were a few other people camping near the parking lot, so I set up my tent there for the night. Families with kids, groups of hikers, it felt safe, almost too normal. The air was filled with the smell of campfires and roasting marshmallows, laughter echoing through the trees. I even shared some hot dogs with a couple of fellow campers, trying to ease into the camping vibe. That night, I slept fine. I mean, I didn't feel like I was in the middle of nowhere yet. But the next day, I packed up and set off for the spot I had marked on my map, a secluded clearing about 7 miles deep into the woods. It was around 3 p.m. when I started the hike, later than I should have, but I figured I could make it before dark. I quickly realized how unprepared I was. The trail markers were barely visible, and using a compass was harder than it looked in all those survival shows. What should have been a 3-hour hike turned into almost 6 hours of getting lost, backtracking, and sheer frustration. By the time I reached the clearing, the sun was already sinking behind the mountains. The air turned cool, and a thick silence settled over the woods. It was just me, the towering trees, and the darkening sky. I hurried to set up camp, trying to get my fire going before the light completely vanished. The quiet was unnerving. It wasn't the peaceful, calming kind of silence. It was the kind that made you feel like something, or someone, was watching. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of leaves. Every time I looked around, the shadows seemed to stretch and shift. I managed to fall asleep after a while, but not for long. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps outside my tent. Not the quick, scurrying steps of an animal. These were slow, deliberate. My heart pounded in my chest as I lay there, frozen, straining to listen. The steps circled my tent. I reached for my flashlight, but my hand trembled so much I couldn't bring myself to turn it on. I just waited, wide-eyed, listening to something, or someone, move outside. The steps would stop for a few moments, and then start up again, like whatever it was toying with me, trying to see if I'd react. It went on for what felt like hours. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just an animal, maybe a curious deer or a raccoon looking for food. I told myself I was being paranoid, that nothing was out there. But the pit in my stomach didn't go away. When I woke up the next morning, it was already late, probably 10 or 11 a.m. I should have been up hours ago, but I was so drained from the night before. The woods around me were still and quiet, almost too quiet. I felt uneasy, like I should pack up and leave, but I was exhausted and figured one more night wouldn't hurt. That third night, though, things got worse. As soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, that feeling came back, the sensation of being watched. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the fire, but every crack of a branch or shuffle of leaves made me jump. Around midnight, I heard the footsteps again, only this time, they were faster. It sounded like something was running around my tent. I sat up, clutching my flashlight, waiting for the noise to stop. Then, something hit the side of my tent. Hard. I shouted, "What the hell?" hoping to scare off whatever it was, but the footsteps didn't stop. They kept circling the tent, faster now, like whatever it was taunting me. My heart was in my throat as I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, flashlight in hand. In the distance, just at the edge of the firelight, I saw a figure. Tall, thin, standing unnaturally still, its back turned to me. My throat tightened, and my legs felt like they were made of lead. "Hey!" I shouted, trying to sound brave. "Who's out there?" The figure didn't move, didn't turn around. And then, it started to laugh. A low, guttural laugh that echoed through the trees. My blood ran cold. I stumbled back into the tent, zipped it up, and curled into a ball, my heart pounding in my ears. Suddenly, it was chaos. It felt like hands were slapping against the sides of the tent, dozens of them. Shaking it, pushing it in. I could hear footsteps all around me, laughter, whispers. My mind raced. What was happening? Was it a group of people messing with me? Or something worse? I don't remember when I passed out. When I woke up, it was daylight again, the fire long dead. The woods were silent, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that made my skin crawl. I decided I couldn't spend another night here. I packed up my gear as fast as I could, planning to hike back to the parking lot before it got dark again. That's when I heard it, the distant scream, faint but unmistakable. It was someone calling for help. Instinct kicked in, and I started running toward the sound, shouting, "Where are you?" "I'm coming." But as I got closer, the scream changed. It turned into laughter. That same, sickening laugh from the night before. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. Fear gripped me like a vice, and I turned around, bolting back to my camp. I threw my stuff into my pack, ready to run. But as I opened my tent to take it down, I froze. There was someone inside. It was me. But not me. This version of me was pale, gaunt, with sunken eyes and a twisted grin. Blood dripped from its mouth, and its eyes, completely black, stared back at me. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. The thing inside the tent slowly crawled toward me, still grinning, its limbs moving in jerky, unnatural ways. I screamed, turned, and ran as fast as I could through the woods, not even caring if I was going the right way. Branches whipped at my face, my legs burning from the exertion, but I didn't stop until I slammed into someone. I fell back, looking up to see a man standing over me. He was tall, wearing a black suit, definitely not a hiker. He held a flashlight, and in a calm, low voice, asked, "Are you all right?" I couldn't speak, couldn't even think straight. He helped me up, told me he was a park ranger, though he didn't look like one. He led me to a black SUV parked nearby, and without questioning it, I got in. As we drove away, I started to feel a tiny bit safer, though my heart was still racing. But just as I thought I was in the clear, the car screeched to a halt. Standing in the middle of the road was the thing, the other me. Its body was twisted, its arms hanging unnaturally by its sides, and it waved at us, grinning that same awful grin. The man cursed under his breath, floored the gas, and drove straight through it. I felt the bump as we hit it, but when I looked back, it was gone. We reached the parking lot just as the sun was rising. I got out of the car, shaking, barely able to process what had just happened. The man didn't say much after that. He just handed me a bottle of water, nodded, and told me to take care of myself. Before I could ask him any more questions, he was back in the SUV, driving off down the dirt road, disappearing into the trees as if he'd never been there at all. I stood there for a long time, my legs weak, mind swirling with a mix of confusion and fear. The parking lot was completely empty except for my car, which felt odd. I hadn't seen another vehicle the whole time I'd been up there, and no one had been around when I started my hike, so how did the man show up? I wanted to brush it off as a coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. Nothing about this trip felt right anymore. I fumbled with my car keys, my hands still shaking as I unlocked the door. Sliding into the driver's seat, I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. My body ached from the sprint through the woods, and my mind was still trying to make sense of what I had seen, or thought I had seen. I debated whether to call someone, my brother, a friend, but I knew they wouldn't believe me. Hell, I barely believed it myself. As I started the car and pulled out of the lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. The trees lining the road seemed taller, more ominous, their branches twisting in unnatural ways. Every shadow felt like it was moving, every sound seemed amplified. I sped up, my eyes darting between the road and the woods, half expecting to see that twisted version of myself emerge from the tree line, grinning that horrible grin. The drive back to town was a blur. I kept the radio off, not wanting any distractions, but the silence inside the car was almost worse. Every few minutes, I'd glance in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something sitting in the back seat. I wanted to believe that once I was out of the woods, everything would go back to normal, that whatever I experienced would be left behind with the trees. But deep down, I knew something had followed me. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I felt a small sense of relief. The familiar sights of home, the neighbors' houses, the cars parked on the street, made me feel like I was back in reality. I sat in the car for a few minutes, trying to calm down before getting out. But as I reached for the door handle, I saw it, a handprint smeared on the back window. It was small, child-sized, and it hadn't been there when I left. My heart skipped a beat, and I whipped around, looking into the back seat. Nothing. But that pit in my stomach, the same one that had been gnawing at me for days, returned. I rushed inside, locking the door behind me, and collapsed onto the couch. I kept telling myself that I was just tired, that I was imagining things. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the image of that other me, its eyes, that twisted grin. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside felt like a sign that something was coming for me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of footsteps outside my window. But nothing came. A week has passed since that camping trip, and I haven't gone back to work. I've barely left the house. The rational part of my brain keeps trying to convince me it was all some kind of hallucination, brought on by stress and lack of sleep. But the other part of me knows it was real. It's hard to explain, but I feel different. Like a part of me was left behind in those woods, and something else came back in its place. Sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the mirror, I don't recognize myself right away. My face looks the same, but there's something off, something in my eyes that wasn't there before. And at night, when the house is quiet, I hear things. Whispering, laughter, and sometimes, footsteps. I haven't told anyone about what happened, not even my brother. He'd probably laugh it off, call me crazy. But I know I'm not. Something is out there. And the worst part? I don't think it's finished with me yet. Thank you for listening to Spine-Chilling Stories. What would you do if you were out in the woods alone and encountered something so horrifying? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more terrifying tales. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your lights on.